there's sort of two ways to make an omelet. The one that you're most familiar with is the one that's folded, looks like a half moon. It's the kind you get at a diner, stuffed with bell peppers, mushrooms, anything you want to put in it. The classic French omelet is rolled. It looks more like a pointed cartoon cigar. Usually has sort of three sides. And there are three characteristics of the French rolled omelet. One is that shape. Instead of a half moon, you'll see it looks like a torpedo or an old-fashioned cartoon cigar. The second is there won't be any color, no browning. It should be pale yellow. The third is it should be completely smooth. You shouldn't see any creases or pleats or curdles or anything. And I guess there's a fourth characteristic is that they tend to be very moist inside. So that's it. That's what we're going to make here, the classic French omelet. Another point worth making is that a lot of chefs say, I've read this in many books, I've seen it in many videos, they say if you want to test the skill of a cook, I ask them to make an omelet. Jacques Pepin says that, Marco Pierre White says that, it's a common thing. I'm not claiming to be great at this, I'm just saying this is one of those classic tests, because as you'll see, this is hard to do. It takes a lot of practice. I get it right sometimes, and sometimes I don't. My father, who just loves to taste, he never complains if I blow it on the color or the shape or the curds or whatever. He just eats it happily. But I'm proud of it. I want to make sure that I get it right. I told a story in an article that maybe some of you wrote, because it was linked to the last video, of when I was working the egg station one day at the restaurant. Not a single omelet that I made went out. Each one of them was deemed unworthy on some grounds or another. Now this was it's a student restaurant, so they were a little bit more forgiving, but most restaurants get extremely apoplectic if they have to throw away food. But I was embarrassed by that, and so I went and bought basically a pallet full of eggs and set up a station at my home kitchen in New York at the time, and just spent hours all day one day making omelets until I got it to the point where I thought I knew what I was doing. And when I went back and asked to work egg station the next weekend, was first told no, and I said, I practiced, I can do it, and they asked me, okay, did you do it right now? And I did one that looked okay, and they let me do it, and I was very, proud that I had sort of passed the test. So we'll see how well I do now. All right, so this is what we're using. These are the ingredients and equipment. You see we got bowls, we got 3 eggs in each bowl, a little heavy cream, butter, that's Gruyere. I'll get to that later. You don't have to fill this type of omelet, but often they get filled. This is crucial as a non-stick pan. And you'll see there's some videos of Pepin where he constantly uses a fork. And I suppose the fork scratched the non-stick surface, and so he must just throw out pans and get new ones all the time. I, on the other hand, recommend a silicone flat whisk, which will not harm the non-stick surface of your pan. You'll see why in a minute. And then this is a fine herb, or fines herbes in French omelet. We have flat leaf parsley, tarragon, and chive. It should have chervil. Those are the 4 classic herbs in a fine herb omelet. But chervil's hard to find, hard to get. I tend to plant it once a year in my little herb box, and it's delicate, and you get a couple of months out of it at most, and then the thing dies. I probably also don't know how to grow chervil properly, and so maybe somebody who knows better, their chervil would last longer. But that's the way it goes for me. Notice, I'm not going to talk too much about knives. I used to be known to travel with my knives. I got much ridicule for that. I stopped doing that, but only because I had certain knives I purchased identical copies of the knife that I keep at home, and I just leave them here so that when I come here I have a knife ready to go. So this is a Japanese knife known as a gyuto. That's the shape. Gyuto literally means cow sword, although you couldn't use this on a cow because the blade is much too delicate. If it hit bone, it would chip. So it's really basically just a vegetable chopping, Japanese equivalent of a French chef's knife, but superior in many ways. The one thing I would caution you all on is don't get a knife like this if you're not willing to maintain it and sharpen it on the stones, which I can explain at another time, but it's something that will go dull and you'll have to constantly refresh. And if you're not willing to buy stones and use them, learn how to use them, it's just not worth it. If you are, however, you'll get a lot better performance out of this knife than you would out of a regular, an old German knife or a cheaper supermarket knife. So we're gonna just chop these herbs very fine. Haché is the French term for how to do the flat leaf parsley. I already destemmed this. I didn't need to demonstrate that. You just take it off the stem. It's pretty simple, okay? So we just hold the top of the knife like that, put it into bunches. You're going for small pieces here. One of the great things about cooking in this kitchen is the whole island is a cutting board top. And as I like to say, it's as big as the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. So lots and lots of room to cut things, to get your station organized. Very, very wonderful space to cook, I gotta say. In addition to the stove behind me, which is far superior to what I have at my house. So that's about what we want, you know, fine. This is all gonna be mixed together, so you don't have to worry about cross-contamination. You just sort of scoop it onto the knife like that, into the bowl it goes, okay. Do our tarragon. This is gonna give you the most flavor, the most intense flavor by far. That's why I use a little less. You can smell it when you cut it. My mother likes to joke that there's no point in using chervil because to the extent that it has flavor, which isn't much, it's the same as parsley. She's probably right, but if I could get it, I would use it. The problem is, you can almost never get it. Okay, just sort of wipe that off. Be careful. Arch your finger up so that you don't drag it along the side of the blade because that will hurt. Now, next clip, I'm going to show you a trick to do for the chives. Okay, this is a trick I learned from Thomas Keller of how to make chive cutting easier, because chives are difficult. So you sort of cut a long strip. Your knife has to be really sharp to cut paper. It's actually a good test of if the knife is sharp, but especially paper towels because they're, you know, fuzzier. And so if the knife isn't super sharp, it won't work. Now you take this, and you just get a little water on it, not much. Now watch. Here are your chives. These are squirrely, and this helps stabilize them. So you just wrap that around, okay, and they will come just like a little, all right, now your chives are gonna stay more stable, and you want to cut them kind of as thin as possible. Okay. Another thing you learn from the culinary school is the claw grip, right? Your knuckles should be in contact with the knife at all times, but your fingertips pointed backward, and as long as you do that, you are much less likely to get injured. Kind of move your hands back. Now, a real pro, this isn't bad, but a real pro would speed through these with unbelievable alacrity, which I am not doing, because A, I don't need to, and B, you are kind of slightly more likely to get yourself injured if you try to jam through this with lightning speed. Now, chives too, you're never gonna get them all because it gets harder and harder to cut the further back. I see these big pieces, I wanna get them out of there, but the little pieces, that's enough. That's about an equal amount, that's fine, that's plenty. We're good there. And then just kind of stir them up because these are gonna go into the eggs and we want them evenly mixed. Okay, well, there's the herbs. All right, that's good. Okay, so here's our eggs. I'm sure everyone knows this. If you don't, you know, this is one of those things that they teach you, is you don't break an egg on the side of the bowl because you're just pushing shell in. You might get shell contamination, you might puncture the yolk. Do it on something flat and you just, and there's your egg. Now, that yolk broke, so it doesn't matter, it's all gonna be blended in anyway. But there's no shell in there, that's what's important. Okay. And here's a trick I learned from Papon, who was on the faculty where I went to culinary school, and who would sometimes come down and see us and talk to us. So I met him a few times. And he would say, always, before you start blending it, poke the yolks to break them. This will help the eggs blend better. And you watch one of his videos, he'll just go nuts with the fork. I don't want to, my bowl isn't quite big enough, I don't want to send egg flying everywhere. But you're looking to blend this completely thoroughly. If you see any color variation, it's not done. And he'll pull the fork up and you get these long strands. That's what you're looking for. Papon's videos were extremely helpful to me to learn how to do this, at least credibly. And once he was there, and I was talking to him and I was saying, you know, this is probably around 2011, 2012. You know, your video is so helpful, and he gave me this suspicious look, and he said, what video? And I said, oh, I guess it's from your PBS show, but there was a clip of you making an omelet, and it was so instructive, and he says, what are you talking about? They're ripping me off, or something like that. The people are cutting this and putting it up there illegal. I felt bad. I thought, hey, I didn't do it. I just was useful to it, and for all I know, he called his lawyer the next day and got them taken down. But you can look now, and these videos are all still up there under official auspices, so no one's ripping anybody off anymore. Okay, that's about right. See that? Nice and blended, long curdles. Now, put a little cream in. Traditional, the recipe that I learned is 1/3 of an ounce per egg, you know, which is 2 tablespoons roughly. I just eyeball it. Now, what does that do? Gives it a little more body, fluffens it up. You can see it lightens the color. Okay, and then season it before you cook it. So, pepper, pinch of salt. You know, like all pretentious wannabe chefs, I use kosher salt. Put that in there, and then herbs. All right, so that's ready to be cooked. I was asked, why not use a whisk rather than a fork? It's just easier. I suppose there's no reason you can't use a whisk, but you would need a lot bigger bowl, because if you tried to whisk in a bowl this small, eggs would go everywhere. The fork is easier to contain. I think it's just a convenience matter. Okay, so as you can see, I'm making 2, and we are now ready to cook. I just wanted to comment, the pan, of course it's non-stick, it's an all-clad 8-inch. Doesn't really get used here except by me to make omelets, so the non-stick is still in great shape. They make one, a traditional French skillet. Notice that this has that rolled edge outward, right? A traditional French skillet would come up to the side, kind of to here, and then be cut straight along there. I actually think that works a little bit better for omelets, but I don't have one. I actually do have some at home. I don't have the all-clad that's the same size as this without lip. I may buy it. We'll see. Another alternative is this newish company called Made In, which is kind of a direct all-clad competitor. I did buy their 12-inch non-stick skillet, which cost about half what the all-clad cost, and the non-stick coating is at least as good. So that's something to think about. Again, I don't get any money from these product endorsements. I'm just telling you honestly what I think. All right, this is a trick I learned at the restaurant, which is not in most recipes. Now, at the restaurant, and in some very well-equipped home kitchens, you'd have what's called a salamander, which is a broiler, an outside broiler with a top that has a heating element, and you can kind of slide it up and down depending on how close you want it to go. I don't have that here. I have the next best thing, which is an oven with a broiler. Most ovens have them. This one's fancy, so it has many settings. Maxi, convection. Well, I'm on mini, meaning minimal heat. And you can see the rack is 1 rung down, because the closest one, the heat wouldn't fan out enough. And this is just gonna help our omelet set after we cook it on the stove and help the cheese melt. So we start with butter, pretty generous amount, about a tablespoon. There's my 8-inch non-stick, medium high. Let it get hot for a minute here. You wanna wait until this butter foams. That they do the right, just push it down now, you know, obviously. You want to do this only to the extent that you don't want your fingers to touch the pan, but this kind of speeds up the process. Now we pray to the kitchen gods that I don't blow it. That's about what you're looking for. Now this is the trick. In go the eggs, okay? Essentially the pan never stops moving. Now you're using your whisk, just stir like crazy, okay? This is what is preventing the curdle and making it smooth. So you're shaking the pan, kind of like this, the edges, really runny. Notice it's cooking, but it's cooking gently and slowly because you never stop moving. So it doesn't have time to stay in contact with any one portion of the pan. Yep, we don't have when you have a surface that you can start to you're getting a bit of a lip there. Okay. Now what you do is you can sort of bump it down, okay? Pull this over. A bit further. Now, this is where I fill it. A little bit of, this is obviously not an omelet that you can make like a Denver omelet or fill it with a lot, okay? Now, this is a step that some don't take. I do. Into the mini broiler. And you don't even close the door. Just want to melt that cheese and set the omelet. A minute, you know. Okay. Comes out. Give it a little more. Whisk to turn it over. And then you sort of change hands. So your hand is in the other direction, and this is how you, like this. Bad shape, but we remedy that with paper towels. You don't want to touch it with your bare hands by moving it. Believe me, we did this at the restaurant all the time. Use a towel and get it to the right shape. All right, not perfect. You can see a curdle there and a curdle there, so could be a little worse. Could be a little better, but mostly it's smooth, no color. And there's your French rolled omelet. I'd be better at this if I did it more frequently. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. As it is, I do it 2 or 3 times a year, so they don't come out exactly flawless. But I can tell you that looks a lot better than the first ones I was doing in culinary school and at the restaurant. Color's decent, especially on the second one. There was no color. Shape, not bad. A little bit of no curdle on the first one, so if I could combine these two, the color of the second one and the smoothness of the first one, that would pretty much be a perfect rolled omelet. Just to show you the inside, it's very moist, almost runny in the dead center. So if you don't like moist, runny eggs, this is definitely not the omelet for you. But if you do, this is the classic way to do it.